two by two that should come into the ark. The foreshadowing of the animal.
And again, we're going to continue. We're on Parshat Noach, page 1 of Parshat Noach.
He said that Noach, the famous thing about Noach, 2 by 2, and you see the first time Noach is mentioned, well, the second time, it's Noach and Noach. You see this?
Well, no, the Tom is on the first Noach.
What? No, I'm not talking about the Tom manuscript.
The word Noach appears in Parshat.
Oh.
Noach appears in Parshat Breshit several
and the fact
times.
that he's later. No, but right here it's 2 times I'm saying. Noach and the whole thing. Everything's
and he's going to comment on the fact that we have the word Noach repeated twice right after each other. So Toldot Noach Noach. And he's going to give 2 interpretations of this. The first he's going to draw on Rashi, where he says the events of Noach were a result of his personality and his endeavors. So Rashi famously comments, was Noach in fact a tzaddik? Was he in fact somebody who was completely righteous and could stand at the same level as Abraham? Or was he in fact somebody who was tzaddik b'dorotav, who was tzaddik in his own generation, but if you would have put him into a different generation, he would have been someone different? So we see both of those in the fact that we've got Noach and Noach right next to each other. We might have the great Noach, or we might have the mediocre Noach, but he was still the best that was around then. And we see both of those as having at least some standing. So I think this is a very important point to emphasize, that Torah doesn't have a singular meaning, that we learn different aspects, sometimes not of the story itself, but of other things, based on multiple levels of interpretation of each word and each phrase. The Gemara tells us, Ayin Panim L'Torah, that there are up to 70 interpretations for each word or phrase, and each one has an independent standing, an independent meaning, and an independent lesson to tell us, and none of them negate the other ones. So Noach can be the greatest figure, and he can also be a mediocre figure, and he has some aspects of both of them. People are complicated. He quite obviously had some greatness to him because God spoke to him in a generation where God was trying to withdraw from the world, so there must have been something great about him. But on the other hand, he didn't spare anybody except for his family, so his greatness obviously lacked somewhat. So he was both. He was a great figure and a mediocre figure. Point B about the fact of Noach and Noach. At this point, the Torah has placed Noach on an equal level with Abraham, Yaakov, and Moshe. Why? Because all of these people, we say that God calls for them Abraham, Abraham, Yaakov, Yaakov, Moshe, Moshe. So by saying Noach, Noach, by repeating the name twice in adjacent phraseology, we see that he's giving him that equivalence. He's giving him that greatness. And the Torah then goes on to say that he's an Ish Tzaddik. What's his greatness? That he was Tzaddik, that he was righteous. I think it's interesting that he brings it forward this way, and yet he doesn't tell us that when we've got God calling to Moshe, Moshe, or Abraham, Abraham, there are always the 2 words in a sentence where God is calling to them. We always have the name written once, and then a psik, a straight line that tells you there's a little pause, and then the name written again. Whereas in Noach, we have this pause. We have this minor king that's coming before it. We have the Zakef Katon. It's going to tell us stop. And then you've got Noach who's standing all by himself. You've got Noach with a Revi'i on top of his name, which is a completely different phraseology than we're going to see with Abraham, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yaakov, and we don't see Yitzchak, Yitzchak.
Well, he's not calling him here.
But I'm just saying, I find it fascinating that he didn't draw that out, and I think it's exactly because of that. I think he thinks it's because the sentence really is not an appellation. It stands on its own based on the sentence, and that's not a fair parallel to try to compare and contrast. We're going to go on to 5. Ish, a man. This is a mercha. Sometimes mercha will be partnered with tipcha. Sometimes it will be partnered with Tevir, and sometimes it will come right before Sof Pasuk, but it's always something that has something else afterwards into it. Always leads into something else. It's a gentle beginning that's going into something else. That's the reading mark that's underneath the word Ish, Mercha. Number 5, his determination made him a man who mastered his life rather than a victim of his time or a servant of his environment. Now you've got to think, where is he getting this from? He's getting this from the gentleness of the mark. That this is something that is, again, phrasing him separately from things that are before, starting something new, and leading into. So that's why he's saying that it's shown by the directional shape of the mark, but the fact that he's an Ish, that he's gently flowing forward and making his own path, rather than having been influenced. So if he would have had a tipcha, if he would have had something that was backwardly looking, then he would have been connected to the things that were before him. Because he's got this mercha, he's got a forward outlook, he is not so intimately connected to his generation, which again, interestingly, is both his strength and his weakness. Tzaddik, and very interestingly, he is, Dr. Seaman is telling this not tzaddik just, but a just. He's telling us that this is a noun, and again, he's phrasing it so that it fits into its own sentence in the interpretation below, not so that it grammatically flows into a single reading of the sentence. Number 6, his words did not conflict with his deeds. The reading mark that's under tzaddik is a tevir. We didn't get to that one in our definition section. Nonetheless, we will discuss it later on.
I want to make one comment. Tevir is, like we were talking about names. A tabur is a belly button, and you see that it looks like a belly button there. That dot. Like our tabur. That's what I'm saying, from the same root.
I guess we'll quickly go back to the introduction page, LXV, and we're going to go down to the bottom, number 17, Tevir. Tevir is a note that is a reading mark that appears underneath the word. It looks like a mercha with a dot on top of it. It always has a pause afterwards. It's like a comma in a sentence. So it's usually phrased either by itself, Tevir, or with a darga in front of it. Darga Tevir. But again, after the Tevir, you notice that we're going to pause. Or with a mercha in front of it. Mercha Tevir. So he defines it as a low-range king. Again, afterwards, there is a definite comma in the sentence. It is something that gives us a sense of stability and security. It is composed of an outer protective shell of the containing essence in the center. So we notice that it's got both the mercha with a dot in between, so it's something that's protected or being sheltered from something that is around it. So again, now we're talking about Noach, who is somebody who is an ish tzaddik, a man who is just, and it's got that sheltered sense about him. His words did not conflict with his deeds. He was honest with himself. So you'll see that introspection, that something being contained within something else by the idea of the outer shell with something inside of it that Tevir tells us. So he's telling us that Noach was an inwardly consistent, maybe retrospective, introspective type of a man, because of the shape of the Tevir, because of the fact that it has this inward something being protected. He's a just individual to others, applying truth not only in words but in his deeds. So again, there's that consistency. He protects his outside with his inside, as suggested by the shape of the reading mark.
It's also that in Yiddish there's an expression on tzaddik and tel, which is just like a tzaddik for yourself, but not. They say that about the chasidah, that the stored is called a chasidah, which is a good character chassid. So why don't we distort? We want to emulate the Because they say about chesed, it's only a chesed for its own kind. It doesn't do chesed to others. So that's why it's verboten to it.
Number 7, tamim. The word tamim is defined as complete. It's got a mercha underneath it. It's got that gathering note. Well, remember, mercha flows into something else, gently starts a new phrase or a new concept, and is going to lead into something else. Tamim, number 7.
Oh wait, tamim haya, it's a merchat tibcha here.
Yes, but we're going to, tamim should stand by itself, but should also flow into the next word because it's a mercha. So we're going to see that there's both elements of it starting a new phrase, gently, going into something else, but having some meaning in and of itself for that word. So that's why it's got its own note. Mercha, number 7, therefore he was complete, both with regard to his personal affairs and in relation to the problem of his society. So again, he's going to tell you that this is going to flow into something else, that his internal consistency is what made him complete, and that's going to be what's going to lead him forwards into the world that he's going to create from here on in. As we see from the mercha, it's going to lead into the tipcha. Haya, he was. Number 8, as a result. So why do we say as a result? It's a tipcha. It's that backwards looking gathering that comes after the mercha. The two are always phrased together. So that's why we say as a result. Because it's a tipcha. It looks back. It collects what it was. His completion, the fact that he was somebody who was able to deal with his society in a fair way. He was well accepted by heaven and by the people on earth. It flows back to the things that were before it, as suggested by Noach.
Well, how was he accepted? I thought he was mocked all those years.
And I thought he was a man of Rivi'i, where he stood alone and was not connected or influenced by others.
He was able to understand and empathize with others. He wasn't
necessarily much.
He wasn't influencing them. Rather, he was able to stand by himself. The completeness of his personality, the tamim, was what was flowing into his haya. His ability to relate to his own generation was only from the position of his own completeness. From the fact that he could stand there aloof and separate from everybody and still understand them, but not be influenced by them.
And not influence them either. But we said that,
forget
the notes for a second.
So again, we're never going to forget the notes as long as we're making this for discussion.
No, I don't mean that. I'm saying, or then we're going to have a problem with the notes, because he didn't affect his generation. That was part of the problem.
Wait. It's not saying that he affected his generation. It's saying that he could understand them. He could judge them fairly. Okay. He could empathize. That doesn't mean that he in any way influenced them. From his position of completeness, he was. From the fact that he could stand by himself. Tamim haya. We're saying, merchat tipcha. Those two words fit together.
Right.
It's not, haya doesn't connect to his generation. Haya connects to his tmimut, to the fact that he was complete in and of himself. He could stand there and judge them fairly, and it wouldn't faze him. Because he was tamim.
An objective view. That is, he
had the ability to stand separate and to empathize. And that's why we see tamim haya, merchat tipcha, two words joined together. Fascinating bit of depth that we get from the reading marks.
But see, I'm also from the reading mark. I'm not ignoring. What I'm getting from it. Well, you say everything's multifaceted, and Noach had that dual aspect to him, but just by the reading marks, this merchat tipcha, I'm seeing, which is what I know about Noach, is that he, like what I said, that expression of tzaddik and pelt, he's a tzaddik unto himself, and he sort of doesn't care if the rest of the people are going to drown and die. And you see it by the tipah, he's unto himself, and you see, it's like in a closed box. You see the merchat tipcha, he's really in his own, you know what I mean? And you see, that's what I see in the merchat tipcha there.
you have to take the reading marks in the context of the words.
Oh, of course, yeah.
No, not of course, not yeah.
Yeah.
Expressly in the context of the words.
Yes,
so
the tamim.
Tamim haya. You have to phrase those two together. His
Okay.
completeness is what is going to make him. So his ability to stand alone is what is going to make him act, make him be able to act.
But it's still just for himself. That's what I'm saying. So I'm just combining the two. I'm not contradicting you.
But
yes, he's a thing, but he's a tzaddik for himself. That's
right.
what a tzaddik himself is.
You can't at all draw from Tamim Haya to anything of the generation per se. Right? You're saying it's from his own internals rather than from his external influences. But when we see again, so he's going to comment number 8.
Okay, but I'm saying also to see it in the context of the whole pasuk. Like you, fine. And I know
no,
we're breaking.
no. Wait. No, Alan, stop. Alan, stop.
Yeah.
The Perush doesn't do that. The Perush doesn't jump back to something that was before.
No, I'm talking about next. The Torah, the next word. I'm saying. You can't take it out of the context of the pasuk.
Wait. You're trying to read into this something that isn't there. If you want to be true to what the Perush is, you have to take it word connecting to the word before it and after it,
right.
Or word completely isolated from the word before it and after it, and you can't jump back to another idea or another sentence.
But wait a minute. But you can't. It's like when you say it, when you translate something. A literal translation is not usually the best translation. If you do word by word literal translation, you have to get the overall meaning too. We can't. Fine, you want to do Tamim Haya, but you also have to see it as part of a whole sentence. Tamim Haya b'dorotav. You just can't lift out.
No. You're missing the essence here. The essence here is that exactly that you lift out. That each word is not a word in a sentence. That each word is a paragraph in and of itself that's fitting into a much larger story.
Okay, yeah.
And you have to take the paragraph out of each word, and that's why when you try and read it,
I know you said in English, right?
those events of Noach, a man, a just, it doesn't make sense, because each word is a paragraph. And the paragraphs do flow together. It's paragraph 1, then paragraph 2, then paragraph 3, and sometimes paragraph 1 and 2 are together, and sometimes they're separate. But you can't by the way that the Perush is written here, you have to really stick very close to context and try not to read more into it that's there, because otherwise you miss the beauty of what's there by trying to read more into it. Sorry, I didn't mean to come down on you, but I don't want I want sort of us to get into the mind frame to do this, and you really have to put yourself into the right place and do this based on the framework that he set up for us, because otherwise we'll interject with things that he might not have thought of. There's a lot of stuff in Torah, and certainly there's a lot to learn, and our additions are important and useful. But it's not what we're here for.
Can I just ask, in terms of a little bit of integration, that each of the words gives us a different aspect of Noah and presents us with his character and paints the picture of the man who is the self-made man, who is introspective and so on, and can appreciate his generation, but is not necessarily part of it or swallowed by it.
Can appreciate them while standing aloof, yes.
Right. So if we look at the words separately, I wonder if there still is the connection that is, Noah, that the dual character. Ish is the self-made man. Tzaddik is that introspective nature where his inside and his outside are consonant. Tamim Haya, the Mareh Yaakov Shiur, that it's a connected idea.
Mm-hmm.
And because he is an ish and a tzaddik and tamim haya, therefore he is that self-made man, introspective man who is able to appreciate but not be influenced by his Dorotav, because when we see the Dorotav, we see that the line underneath, which is the stop, and so it's separate from the haya. The haya is the backwards flowing thought.
And again,
and
I don't want to
another-
get ahead of the people who are listening to this on tape.
Oh.
So we'll go through that section. We'll go through haya b'dorotav, and then we'll come back to this.
Okay.
So haya, as a result, he was number 8. So haya has a tipcha. It's going to complete the phrase of tamim haya. So it's going to gather in some of the influences from his completeness. As a result, he was well accepted by heaven and by the people of earth. So his completeness allowed him to keep on going, and he's bringing in both above and below, both heaven and earth. Why? So this is one of the rare occasions where he goes back and says that it ties into something that is before, the fact that we've got Noach and Noach twice. Nicha le'ilain, he was pleasant to those above him. V'nichan l'tatin, and he was pleasant to those below him. So his ability to stand complete made him somebody who was acceptable to both heaven and to a generation that was completely devoid of any relationship to heaven.
Noach also has that double meaning, also resting and also pleasant. So even his name is
as
double.
confirmed by the closing shape of the directional shape of the reading mark. So again, the fact that the tipcha is going to go together with his completeness. And he makes an aside here and be heyei tamim. In my view, it should be marked by tipcha mercha instead of mercha tipcha, because tamim refers to a completion and elaboration of tzaddik, and indirectly to the meaning of Noach. So this, I think, we're going to leave and discuss later, simply because it's not gonna further a first lecture on this, but it nonetheless, he's drawing from other references to these words, and we'll get to that later. I think it's a little premature to get into stuff like this here. Number 9, in his generations, bidorotav. So not in his generation singular, but bidorotav plural, in his generations. So in dor generation, dorot plural, with a yud vav after them, means in his generations plural. So because of his personal valor, so again, this has an etnachta. Well, remember that etnachta is that stable base. It is the semicolon in the middle of a sentence. It's going to end our first thought, but it's also going to look forward a little bit to our next thought. It's a complete pause. Because of his personal valor, Noach was, so the Tamim Haya, because of Tamim Haya, Noach was also respected in his generations, whom he tried to influence to change their routines and direct their orientation to heaven and to the basic laws of creation. So he gives Noach a lot more credit than Rashi does and than the Midrash does. He says that Noach at least tried. And we again see that this etnachta is a stable base with something pointing above. So he was this beacon of stability, beacon of understanding what the world really was, who tried to point it out to everybody else who was there. He at least had the right focus.
There's a typo here.
And he tried to direct their orientations to heaven. We've got this stable base with something pointing directly up. That's what Noach is trying to do to the basic laws of creation. Again, pointing upwards, as specified by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark and by the subsequent et Elokim. So again, we said this is a viewpoint from which we can see the second half of the sentence. Even though we've got this semicolon, it's not a period. this first phrase is going to look into the next. It's going to be an observation point. We're going to sit at the top of that et nachta, and we're going to look onto the second half of the sentence. So it's a complete stop, but it knows that something else is coming after it. So that's why he can say that even though it's a complete stop, it's looking forward to et ha'elokim.
You see the typo here.
Yes,
It should be
there is a typo there. It should be a hey, not an aleph. But we'll excuse the publisher. B'dorotav, in his generations, the Gemara Sanhedrin presents two conflicting versions. Rabbi Yochanan retains a negative view. Noach was eminent in his generations only. He was considered a just man in comparison to other inhabitants, but he lacked greatness and the originality of Abraham to pray against the flood like Abraham did in the case of Sodom. Reish Lakish thought Noach was great because single-handedly he resisted a generation and did not deviate from cardinal principles. Noach's modesty did not warrant him enough courage to dare making any attempt to alter the decisions of God. So the Gemara is trying to take this this plural to tell you that there's two views of Noach, I suppose.
Is that what? That there were tubs in the plural or something? Yeah.
We're going to go on to 10 because that's a little bit of a side and really doesn't have to do with the reading marks. Et ha'elokim. And remember, this was phrased together because there's only one reading mark. It's got a tipcha, which is a backwards-looking note. It gathers in something that has happened before it, and he defines it as with the God above. Number 10, by belief and full trust in absolute justice, which is accomplished with the God above, and his decisions, Noach shaped his life in the society where he lived, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the related mark. So everything. So now this tipcha is gathering in the entire phrase that's coming before it,
From
the
where
entire first half of the sentence.
From Eila or no? Or just from each
From
section?
Eila.
From Eila.
Why? Because we're coming after an et nachta. So et ha'elokim, because he had this perspective to God above, which we hinted to by the shape of bidorotav, that he had the focus on being stable and looking upwards. He was able to try to shape his society bidorotav with the tipcha, looking back to that. Noach was able to do that again because we've got that backwards looking note coming right after an et nachta. And again, we have number 11, hithalech Noach, two words with only one note with the sof pasuk.
Where's the note?
Number 11, sof pasuk, the colon that comes after it. Sof pasuk is a note. So this is a period. This is an end of a sentence. This closes the formal two-part thought that we're dealing with. Hithalech Noach. Noach was following. Lehithalech is a hitfael. Literally, it means to make yourself walk. So he defines it as Noach was following, which is a proper English translation, but not an exacting one. An exacting one would he made himself walk.
In God.
Noach did not suggest any changes or alterations in the decisions of God. Noach was following, hithalech, Noach, his superior orders without any questions or doubts. So, again, we see that duality of Noach, whether he was going to cancel God's decree by trying to strongly influence people or let God's decree stand. So, et ha'elokim hithalech Noach. That Noach decided that the priority, so before he had the ability to stand above, to be aloof but understanding of people, to be Noach and Noach, to be the person who could be in the higher world and in the lower world, to be the person who had the ability to influence people. And what did he choose? Et ha'elokim hithalech Noach. he chose that standing with what God had decreed was the part that needed emphasis. So, Yitalech Noach, Noach was following, he had to follow the fact that God had made a decree, he had to follow God's orders, and therefore, he maybe, after making an initial attempt, didn't continue to try to so strongly influence people, or didn't push people, because ultimately, if that's what God wanted, that's what God got.
But so I have a question. So you're saying the Zipchan under Et Elohim is looking backwards,
Yes.
but yet, from what you're saying in the last little while, it's more the subject of Yitalech Noach. So it sounds like if Elohim belongs
again,
more to Yitalech Noach than it does to the.
It's both.